Hello and welcome. My name's Jan. I'm from the University of Greenwich and I'm a careers advisor specialising in outreach. And I've been invited to do this presentation, which is about study skills know-how for access students. Now, the first thing I need to say about study skills is, like any skill, it's something that improves with practice. And it takes trial and error, feedback and reflection for you to get it right. So if you're at the beginning of your access journey, the chances are you're thinking, oh my goodness me, study skills, it sounds so difficult. Or, I was never really good at this at school, and have a few apprehensions about study skills. But believe me, if you spend a bit of time getting this right, it will make your experience of being an academic, a student, you'll just enjoy your student experience much more if you've developed some really strong, useful skills that you just sort of like build the muscle on, and it will just make your studying more exciting. But it also means that you'll have some really effective strategies that will help you cope with your workload. So it's really well worth investing the time ahead of your course to really start thinking about how you can improve the way you work and develop those strategies, methods and attitudes that are going to help you be the success you're going to be. So that's what we're going to be covering. And I should say as well that I was an access student, and I tell you, I loved my access course. So I hope you're all going to really enjoy your access course, and I hope, the universities that you end up going to are going to be everything that you expected and more. Okay, so let's start. So what we're going to be covering is we're going to be looking at some of the common anxieties about returning to study and having to hone those academic study skills. And then we've only got half an hour, so there's only so much. Study skills is a module in itself, but we haven't got a great deal of time. So we're going to cover some of the main elements, which is going to be time management, reading and note taking, critical thinking, and an introduction to academic writing. Okay, so let's just deal with some of these common anxieties. So, a new journey, a new chapter. Take a deep breath, dive in. But what are you worried about? The things you're worried about, most access students have worried about in the past. I know I did. All of these things on this list were things that concerned me before I started my access course. So keeping up with other people, that's the main one. Tip number 1, do not believe any student that tells you or claims that they do not work and they don't write all their essays the night before. Don't believe them. Very few people can actually do this. So everyone's worried about keeping up. But if you hone your time management skills, then there's a good chance that you will keep up. And I think if you keep up, it makes the experience more enjoyable. So do try and keep up, but don't, you've got to put in the effort. You've got to put in the time. There's no other way to do it. So just be sensible about your approach, about what's expected of you as a student, and try and organise yourself in a way that you can keep up, because you know what's coming up. You know roughly how long things are going to take you, and we'll deal with that in time management. So the other one is finding time to do everything. Again, that comes down to planning and prioritising, and we're going to be looking at that in the session. Understanding academic language. I still don't understand academic language, but when I don't know what something means, I ask. So today I was in a webinar which was about using the acronym BAME and other things that we might use instead. And I was hearing all sorts of acronyms that I'd never heard of before, like BC, which stands for Black, Asian, Southeast Asian. And I was, completely new. If you don't know, ask. There's always like new words coming along, new acronyms, and before you know it, you'll become familiar, and it will be tripping off your tongue before you can say jackrabbit. Developing confidence in yourself. The confidence comes with time. As you achieve, with your first assignment going in and you getting your grade back, the confidence builds gradually, and the more that you keep at it, the better you get, the better feedback, and listen to the feedback, act on the feedback, and the confidence comes along with it by putting yourself in positions that stretch you. That's where the confidence builds. Coping with student life. Yeah, you can take as much or as little as student life. As an access student, you might have other responsibilities, and you might not want to be, down the student union bar all the time. But, coping with student life is on your terms. Yeah. So you do as much and as little of student life as you want to do. And everyone's got different circumstances. Meeting deadlines. Yeah, deadlines are deadlines. They're not soft lines, they're deadlines. So, we're going to have a look at strategies for meeting those deadlines. And if there is a real reason, and like life happens, we know, if there's a real reason why a deadline can't be met, there's proper procedures that you need to go through to address that, because we know life happens. Making friends with other students. Students always make friends with people. You'll always find somebody from your tribe that you want to hang with, so try not to worry about that. And coping with other responsibilities. So if you're juggling lots of roles, then it's all about the planning. It's all about putting everything down in one place, which brings us on to time management. Oh, but before we do time management, let's have a look at learning styles. So learning styles is a bit contentious at university, and when you talk about teaching and learning, there's a school of thought that says that learning styles, everybody has all types of learning styles. It's just what you prefer. And I think I kind of agree with that. But like we were talking about muscles, the muscle of the mind, the more you test it in one area, the better it gets in that area. So if doing lots of maths and you're very logical and you have to think very logically for a science course, then that might be your preferred learning style. Whereas if you have to think more creatively because you're doing art history, you might be more visual. But, if you have to do things like data, etc. on your course, you develop the skills that you need. It's just about building that muscle. So learning styles, it does help because it's nice for us to understand and have some self-awareness. And if you feel that you've got a certain propensity to go a certain way and you learn better in a certain way, then by all means work to your strengths. Now there's 2 resources here that I've got down. The first one, it helps you assess what your learning style is. And then the second one tells you about how you can utilize that learning style to help you when you're studying. And the young man on the right of this screen, I would say he's probably a visual learner, because behind that screen he's probably watching something that is going in and making sense to him. But the other types of learning, which I don't want to go into it too much because we're going to try and be a bit of everything and have a combination and adjust it according to the situation we're in. But when you do the little test that I've put on the slide that was previous, you might find that you come out as either of these. So verbal, visual, musical, kinesthetic, logical, mathematical, social, solitary, and combination. I think most graduates, undergraduates and students will have to dip into all of those learning styles. And at university, more and more we're asking you to do group work, and on your access courses you'll be asked to do group work. So the social, you're going to have to get used to it. Academics aren't the most social. I've done a postgraduate course recently, and we had to do a large piece of work as a group, and we had some academics that found that a real struggle because they preferred solitary. But in any walk of life that you go into, any career that you go into, you're going to have to demonstrate a range of styles. But it's good to know your strengths because it will help you. I'm very visual, and I know, if I'm going to if I visualize me writing an essay, I'm thinking of it acting out in my head. So that's how I prefer to learn. But then I have had to learn to be a little bit more logical and mathematical, which didn't come easy to me, but it's become easier the more I've had to be that way. So so think about your learning styles. Do some of those tests that might help you identify how you prefer to work, how you prefer to learn, how you prefer to write, read, etc. So let's look at time management now. So there's 2 schools of thought when it comes to time management. There's students that are really good at managing their time, and they really do need to feel in control of their lives, and they don't miss any deadlines, and they work on an assignment steadily. They might be doing 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, and they build in their playtime and everything, and they are great and it works for them. Then there's what I call the lastminute.com. The lastminute.com might leave everything, maybe not as late as the night before, but maybe like 3 or 4 days before the deadline. And then that might really motivate them to work really quickly. It might help with their concentration to sort of zone in on what they need to do. And both of them have benefits. It depends on how you prefer to work. But if you have a busy life and you've got a lot of other responsibilities to fit in, being a steady Eddie as a student is going to reduce your stress levels. And if you don't have too many other responsibilities, you might be able to afford to be a lastminute.com type of student. But be very, very aware of the consequences of being a lastminute.com. One of the main things is technical errors. I have lost count of how many IT failures there's been for last.com type students that have made them had to lose marks on pieces of work. So, you've got to be sensible about it. And it's just it's a method of reducing stress. So if you can try and become in between the two, because some people get their best ideas when they're under a great deal of pressure, and steady Eddies might get theirs when they're just going along slowly, chipping away at a particular task, at a particular assignment. So think about your style and think about the consequences of your style, and just try and build that in to your student planner. And I would recommend that every student gets a student planner, and in that planner you put down all your private appointments, you put down all your social appointments, you put down all your deadlines, all your meetings on campus, and there's even space now in certain planners for like Zoom meetings and Teams meetings, etc. So if you've got everything in one place, now it might be you prefer to have it all on an IT program. I know there's planners that you get for PCs, or you might, if you're more of a kinetic person, if you're more of a reader writer, if you're more of a visual, you might want to have the journal, the planner. And I think the number one bestseller for the planner is the Macmillan Student Planner. You can look it up. It's on Amazon. It's under a tenner. They do it every year. It's the one that most students like because it's got a bit of space for everything. And then, of course, prioritizing. Prioritize, make lists, and then you've got the pleasure of ticking them off. And we're going to have a look at a method for prioritizing in a minute. And the number 4 is incentivize. Incentivize yourself to get tasks done, to get assignments done, and that will help you keep on track. So don't take the treat before you've achieved the goal. So something I did when I was doing postgraduate study recently was I would book myself a manicure when I finished a summative piece, a big piece of work, or I would treat myself to sort of like going out to the cinema and having a nice meal with friends, and so there's always something you could put as a little incentive there to keep you going and something to aim for once the hard slog is done. So let's have a look a bit about the student planner. So here's an example of a student planner. So you can see the person's put down the times of the activity and the to-do today. And it's like I say, it gives students a lot of pleasure. It gives me a lot of pleasure just ticking things off my to-do list. And as it says, include your non-study activities such as family holidays, medical appointments, birthdays, volunteering, travel, if you manage to get anywhere. And it's important to schedule free time and time to catch up with things that you may have missed, because life is funny. Things always take longer than you expect, but don't forget to put in time for rest and enjoyment. So that's an example of a planner, and that comes in the Macmillan one that I just showed you. It's a sheet out of there. But prioritising, it's important to learn how to prioritise, because we tend to do the things that we like first, not the things that we should do. So to help you get away from that, here's a nice priority organiser. And I've used this in the past myself. So in the left-hand side, you write down all of the important things that you've got to do, and you rate it in column A. 10 is essential, 6 is unimportant. And then in B, you write down the urgency of the task that's got to be done, and you score that 1 to 5 as well. And then in column C, you subtract the A from the B, and that will give you the priority in column D. So you'll number it. So the first thing might be priority number 4. The second thing on your list might be priority number 1. And that sort of helps you visually decide how to organise your work, what needs to be worked on, when and how. And then it's finding the time to do it. So like I said, people are individuals, people work in all different ways, and choosing the right time to study is really important. So if you're a person that needs it absolutely quiet, when, if you've got children, you can't deal with interruptions, then wait till they've gone to bed and study at night. If that means you have to have a little nap during the day, then try and get a little nap during the day. But if you get a nice nighttime run, and I'm a nighttime studier, you get a nice nighttime run, you can really focus in, you can really concentrate, and you can get a lot of work done. But you might be somebody who prefers to do the 9 till 5, and anything either side of that is not working for you. So reflect on your own learning, reflect how you like to study. And if you're an early bird, I know students who get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to study, and it works for them. While the house is quiet, they get 3 or 4 hours in before the house starts stirring. So find out what works for you and stick to it. And then, if you get short breaks of time, think about what you can do if you've got a 30-minute break. Think about things that you could do if you've got sort of only a 10-minute break. It might be make a call, it might be check out something, it might be doing a search for a resource online. So, try and use your time efficiently so that you don't waste time. And then with studying as well, some of us like to really sort of throw ourselves in and do like 3 or 4 hours on a trot. It's important to have breaks when you're studying, otherwise your brain gets tired and the information stops going in. So do schedule in and factor in some breaks. If it might be just like 2 minutes for a stretch and for a walk around the block, of 5 minutes maybe. It might be 15 minutes for a cup of coffee and just to listen to something on the radio or listen to a bit of music. But reflect on what works best for you and try and build in those breaks. But it is important to get up and move every now and then, because that just helps the oxygen get to your brain and helps you with your memory and helps you reflect on some of the reading or the writing that you might have been doing. So breaks, really, really important. So that's a bit about time management. And as I say, there's never enough time. So the more organised you can be with your time, the better. So how to read. So if you're an Access student, you may have recently left compulsory education, and reading might be something you've always been doing, but you might be an Access student that's been out of education for 4, 5, 20 years. So how to read. I remember when I went to do my Access course, I was really surprised. I'd always read for pleasure, and I was really surprised that the reading that I was expected to do was so different to the reading I was used to doing, the reading for pleasure. I found it a bit of a struggle, and I didn't know that, different types of reading existed. So this video is not for us to look at now, but if you can look at it in your own time, how to read a book a day. It's by this guy called Jordan Harry, and he gives you some fantastic tips about speed reading. And that was, I had no idea there was such a thing as speed reading. I thought that you had to literally vocalize every word as you read. And when I learned about speed reading, it really did revolutionize my reading and my ability to understand what I was reading. So this guy, Jordan, he talks about the importance of understanding the context of your reading. So that means reading the front and the back cover of the book that you're going to be reading, having a look at the contents, having a look at the specific chapter, or if it's a review, the specific review that you're going to be reading. Taking 10 seconds per page just to skim through it and familiarise yourself with the flow and the language. And then, maybe 30 seconds scanning a page to pull out the key points. And then you can go in for a speed read. And then because you've viewed the page a couple of times, it just seems to happen automatically. And if it doesn't, then he's got techniques like he calls it bouncing, gliding and pacing. 3 different techniques that you could use. One of them was likely to suit your style of reading that will help you move down the page and not constantly having to go back to the beginning of a sentence because you're not quite sure what you've read. So it's worthwhile taking the 10 minutes to have a look at his TED lecture. He's got some brilliant tips in there. But the other things you need to consider with reading is time of day. There's no point trying to read, especially if it's quite complex reading. There's no point trying to do this at like 10 o'clock at night if you're tired. So reading is one of the things that is best done when you're fresh. The place is important. I always wondered why people wanted to go to Starbucks and Cafe Nero to read, because I would find that distracting. But apparently, because it's got a nice sort of hum of human activity, that really suits a lot of people when they're reading. So the conditions, are you warm? Are you cold? Are you comfortable? And that brings you to posture. Even though you might think you're reading better if you're slumped over, you're probably not, because it's the whole thing to do with oxygen to the brain. And also, if you're taking notes as well, you do need to be in an upright position. The speed, well, Jordan talks about the speed, and that it does improve. The more you get used to the language of your particular subject, the easier it is to read the complex text that belongs to that subject. And he talks about the methods. Paper versus screen. I'm so old school. I like paper and I love annotating on paper, but I have learnt to use screen. So I use screen for sort of background reading, I call it, and I make like hand notes, and I don't print anything. I rely on my hand notes. But for the deep reading, I like paper. I will photocopy or print off chapters and annotate and take notes as well. And then also with the reading list that you're given as an access student, and when you get to university, you don't have to read everything. And it's also nice for you to introduce material that you want to read, that you've come across, that you find interesting. As long as you've got the main concepts in place, etc., or the main theories, then that's enough. That you're not expected to read everything on the reading list. Stick to the stuff that you tend to veer towards, that make more sense to you, that really helps you explain or understand your perspective of a certain theory or model or concept or experiment. Okay, so that's a little bit about reading. Do take the 10 minutes to have a look at Jordan's TED Talk, because it is fascinating. And then there's note-taking. So I think the most common type of note-taking, I can see a spelling mistake in my slide. Please excuse nutrition. So linear notes, it's the most common way that people lay out information that they've read, or it could be in a lecture as well, but this is mainly looking at note-taking when reading. It's the most common form of note-taking. It's a simple way to note down information, and you can annotate and decorate them afterwards to highlight the most important points and to make the notes memorable. All right, and it gives a nice flow when you begin writing an assignment, because it will help you find the structure for your writing that you might be doing. And it's also a nice visually distinctive way that can aid your revision and recall for exams. So it's the most common. And I think well-organised linear notes, they have a nice flow between each section, because usually when academics are writing, they've got a nice sequence, so you retain that sequence, which is helpful for you when you're revisiting the flow. So that's the most common, but it's good to mix it up. And I think a good mix is something which we call nuclear notes. So this is slightly different in that you put the central heading in the middle, and then you do your lists around the central topic. And it's an interesting way which can aid your memory for assignments and exams again. And it encourages you to start organising your ideas. And it's a mixture, it's a hybrid really between the linear and the pattern note-taking that we're going to have a look at the moment. And I think it tends to be easier to read than the pattern notes, but it has all the advantages of the linear note-taking, so that's quite a common way as well. And I think people that are quite visual prefer this way, and especially when they can start seeing these sorts of connections between ideas. So it really helps people get an overview and to start connecting things. So that's nuclear notes. So as I said, it's a hybrid between the linear note-taking and the pattern notes. The pattern notes, when I was doing my access course, we used to call this, what's it called? Mind maps. We used to call it mind maps. And I did this for a long time, but then I got too busy drawing pictures and things around it. And I thought I was losing concentration on what I was more interested in drawing pictures than actually making notes. So it doesn't suit everybody, even if you're quite a visual person. It's great if you're trying to get down all your ideas into one sheet of paper and to sort of try and rearrange and create a structure for an essay or a project, for example. And it's a great way of getting that overview to aid planning. And I think, if you're doing exams and things, they say it's quite mnemonic. It's a learning aid to assist your memory, and a common approach. And one of the common approaches is making acronyms out of various elements of your notes. But it works for some people. Some people find it really confusing, and I, like I said, found it quite distracting because I'd start doodling and then it was all over. So but it's just about finding what works best for you. And then when we're looking at note taking, here's a few top tips. So here's some do's. So note the keywords and the main ideas. Write phrases, not sentences. Link related points by boxes, arrows, numbers, or colour coding. A bit of colour really does. It's amazing how you think orange, and then all of a sudden things just start tripping off that belong to orange or was written in orange. Use your own words and abbreviations. You're all going to create your own shorthand. So for example, these are common ones. I hope you know what they are. But there's, you can make up your own. And I think because people are so used to texting and things, I think people naturally are always abbreviating and creating shorthand. But, I was in my second year of university before I realised the first 3 dots meant therefore. And the same with the second one meant because. But because I was studying anthropology, I knew the symbol for male and for female and male. So they didn't throw me. But the other two, it's just like, well, those 3 dots. So, have a look. If you're not sure about abbreviations, have a look. You'll find them on any web search when you're doing stuff about note-taking abbreviations. Write quotes in different colours. So that's in a different colour. That's quite important because then you're going to avoid plagiarism because you won't think, oh, I wrote that and you didn't. Somebody else did. So that's quite an important one. And leave a nice big margin so you can add any extra notes that come to you when you revisit your notes. That's a good one because otherwise it gets really squashed and dense and you can't make a head or tail of it because it's just too busy. And keep your notes organised, and I would say always put the date on, because sometimes if I didn't put the date on and it wasn't in my own handwriting, I would swear blind I hadn't written those notes. Right, okay, so don'ts. Don't copy chunks and phrases. Really bad idea and a waste of time. Don't handwrite your notes several times just to make them neater. Who cares? As long as you can read them, that's the most important. And if you are photocopying, and you're highlighting the photocopied pages, make your own notes to go with those pages so that you don't, otherwise it just doesn't go in. It really doesn't. It's just real surface learning and you'll forget it as soon as you've read it. So let's move on to critical thinking. What is it? Let's think. So critical thinking, the definition of critical thinking is, it's by a guy called Edward M. Glaser. And he developed a test for critical thinking, and he defined it as critical thinking calls for a persistent effort to examine any belief or supposed form of knowledge in the light of any evidence that supports it and the further conclusions to which it tends. That's a bit wordy, isn't it? But succinctly, in short, it means weighing up the arguments and the evidence for and against. So you're going to have to do an awful lot of critical thinking on your Access course and when you get to university. And what it actually means is that everything's going to have to be evidence-based, everything is going to have to be subject so there's evidence. You're going to be evidencing and evaluating for things that support arguments and competing arguments, and you're going to have to draw conclusions with the evidence that you've got, right? And then from that you're going to have to construct your own line of reasoning to guide your audience through the evidence that has led you to your conclusion or the appropriate conclusion. And then you're going to have to select the best evidence and the best examples to illustrate your argument. That is critical thinking. And it's really important, especially today, that we are all critical thinkers, because there's an awful lot of people that think that just because something's on the internet, it's true, and it's not. So most people who have been to university are quite good at sifting through things on the internet and sort of, eyeing things with a bit of suspicion if they don't ring true. So I think, that's evidence of good critical thinking, and you're going to have to get really good at it because, as I say, there's a lot of misinformation. There's quite a lot of poor level information out there. Information that's where the sources that you're going to be using, you need to be able to critique it. You need to be able to come up with your own thinking around the topic. And original thought is really difficult, but you can have an original opinion, definitely. So you need to get to that point. And so what does it look like in action? Right, so it shows itself in your reading, in your listening, and in your writing. So I'll leave you to have a look through this in more detail, but it's about you deciding what evidence you want to use to support your conclusions if you're reading. When you're listening, it's about checking for consistency and checking body language and eye contact, speed and tone of voice to see whether you've been convinced. And it's about, when you're writing, being clear about what your conclusions are and why. And it's showing a clear line of thought, how you got to that conclusion, and viewing the subject from multiple perspectives, and then being able to write in a critical and analytical style rather than descriptive, personal or journalistic. So if you manage to achieve that, and it doesn't come easy, and it does get easier the more you do it, if you manage to do that, the benefits are that it will enable you to analyse what's in front of you and to think and work with precision, and it will enable you to adopt a structured approach which will become better both as you evaluate, it will become better, and you'll become better able to evaluate the reliability of others, and most importantly, it will get you better grades. Okay, so grades are important. It will improve your grades. So that basically what your teachers want to see, that you've developed these critical thinking skills. So it's worth doing. You can do it even now, just get used to reading, say, a good quality newspaper. I would say The Guardian, and just be really critical about some of the articles that you're reading. So you read the article and then you'll read the same story in a different newspaper, let's say the Daily Mail or the Sun, and then, think about the critical reasoning skills that have gone on with those two journalists. And it's quite interesting how you start to view information that you are fed once you start to become a critical thinker. So let's have a look at introduction to academic writing types. Okay, so most of you are going to have to be doing essays, case studies, reports, written presentations and dissertations, and they've all got their own style depending on the subject. They've got their own language depending on the subject, and it's going to be very, very individual to all of you. So the scientists amongst you are going to be doing lots of reports. Those of you that study things like social work or nursing are going to be doing case studies and essays. Those of you doing things like architecture or business are going to be doing written presentations. A lot of you will be doing dissertations. Not, there's exams, but we won't go there. And there's a move away from exams as well in a lot of universities, because it doesn't really test learning. And I think it's been accepted that that's the case. So anyway, so essays. Essays, we know, focus on analysing and evaluating theory research by other people. And it's centred around a question. And it's usually an argument of some type. So essays, you'll be doing them on your Access course. You'll be well practiced by the time you get to university. Case studies, students like case studies because it's an in-depth study of a single example of an issue and a technique or theory or ideas, and the case study is usually factual. That's what students like, and they're based on real-life examples that can often bring an issue vividly to life. You may be required to analyse a problem and to make recommendations. So again, it's kind of active learning, and it's a good way to learn. Report writing, it's reports depending on your subject, it's going to have different forms, and it will probably have lots of qualitative and quantitative data, and because it's the bedrock of most scientific reports, and it requires precision and detail and accuracy, and it requires a concise style, but you'll learn that if you're doing a science subject. Written presentations are interesting because there's lots of group work at university. There'll be lots of group work on your access course. So you'll do the presentation, but then you'll come away and you'll write up your learning from doing that presentation. And, you might need to critique the presentation and sort of pull it apart and what you would do differently and what went well and what didn't go so well. And, just really reflect and critique on the gathered material that you've done as a group. And that's a really good way of developing those employability skills that, you're going to leave university with. And then there's a dissertation. So the dissertation is just like a big body of work that you choose the title of. And the skill around the dissertation is it's just thinking of, it's more than just an extended essay. And you do have to be extremely organised with your note taking and your reading, and just meet with your supervisors. They will guide you on how to structure your dissertation. But there's more information on the internet and probably at your colleges about these different writing types. So I would have a look and try and practice the style that's required for your subject. But here's an academic framework which I think, whether you're doing a report or a dissertation, might work for you. So clarifying the task. So in this order, this gives you a nice linear order to think about how you're going to tackle a piece of academic writing. So clarifying the task, gathering the materials, organising and planning, write an outline, plan, and first draft, really important. Not many people can just dive straight in and start writing and get it right. Develop your first draft, be prepared to edit, engage, reflect and evaluate. That's when you just think, I've just got to leave that out. I can't make a strong enough argument for that, or that's not relevant. And so, you do really have to be brutal. Sometimes if a paragraph has taken you, I don't know, about an hour to get right, you do not want to just cut it, but you have to be brutal. And it's kind of quite satisfying as well, I think. Yeah, so consider the work and how it could be changed since you've started, and then do your final draft, fine tune it. I haven't done anything about referencing here and bibliographies. That's a session in itself, and you need to just swat up and do whatever style method that they use at your college or your university that you end up going to. But yeah, the edit and the final check. So if you're a steady Eddie, you're going to leave plenty of time for that editing and that final check. If you're lastminute.com, please try and put aside some quality time to go through it slowly, to fine tune, because that can make a big difference in your grade. Okay, so that's a bit about a nice academic framework that might help you. So rounding up, to summarise, we've covered common anxieties, we've covered time management, we've covered reading and note-taking, had a look at critical thinking and how you can develop that, and we've done a short introduction to writing skills. So I hope you found that useful. If we can be of any further assistance, if you want any support with your application to university, or you want to come to an open day, or you want to come to a taster day, or you want to talk about studying a certain subject at the University of Greenwich, then just do get in touch with us. Our email is esu@gre.az.uk, or you can call us, and we've got Chat Live if you want to go online, and people are there to, our recruitment assistants are there to answer the 101 different questions that you get every day. They'll be able to answer for you. And if you want to see what we're doing specifically for schools and colleges, it should have colleges in there, but we haven't got it. Anyway, so if you want to see what we're doing specifically, or if we've got any recorded information, then have a look on our web pages at www.gre.az.uk for schools. So I hope you found that useful, and I hope one day maybe I'll see you in real life, and if I do, you need to say, I watched your study skills how to presentation, and then I'll think, there was somebody watching. So thank you very much. I hope to see you in the real world sometime soon. Bye.